Did you guys have any type of division or focus on potential crafts that are not of this earth?
Well, listen, I don't have any independent knowledge of that. However, it'd be hard to believe that it doesn't exist, that it does not exist. I think the closest that we came to it, at least understanding as students at Quantico, was this behavioral science unit that was extremely unique, really had a specific mission. It didn't really look anything like they make it out to look on TV, with Criminal Minds, and that they're totally involved in every investigation that comes down the pipe from law enforcement across the country, across the world. But I always had the sense that it had to exist. And there were individuals that I got to know along the way whose career paths were different than my career path, very different. And most of the time, if we're together and we have an opportunity to work together, we're going to talk about things. We're going to actually reveal specific items of factual nature and talk about it to get help, right? I want to be able to say, guys, put eyes on this. What do you think? And those guys and girls,
none of that.
That didn't happen.
Yeah,
they take, right? They
even
take.
Sensitive stuff. Like that's it's kind of like a professional courtesy when you all have similar classification or similar security clearances. You share. You share because you all have access to need to know information. And guess what? In this case, you need to know the thing I'm talking about to give me some insight. But there are people who just take.
Just take. There's no, and you get it. So after a while, you start to build your own kind of conclusion. I think pretty accurately, and you say, okay, I'm not gonna push that person, but I will provide information.
And it's not always just people who are doing what we call special projects, right? DARPA, for example. You always have to run all of the strange findings you find through an index of special projects. Like, could this be a special project? Could this be like a subdivision of a private military contractor that's running something new on our behalf through a special project, highly classified, highly compartmentalized program?
But you're also separated out basically like in your own cells, like on a need-to-know basis with things. So it's not like you're read in, for example, as a spy on, oh, here's every single thing we're working on. It's nothing close to that, no?
No, yeah, exactly. Because your need-to-know is literally operation to operation. So when we come across people who are takers, or we come across these people who are in positions that are so sensitive that they don't share, that doesn't always mean that they're doing cool shit. Sometimes that means they're the ones spying on us.
Right.
Right? Because all of your internal counterintelligence, like the FBI department in charge of looking for FBI moles, the CIA department in charge of looking for CIA moles, those are people who they're not going to share.
And they're not wearing name tags all the time.
Yeah.
No, definitely not. What always cemented it for me and kind of got me to the point where I started to believe that this unit or whatever it was existed was when we would get, actual asks from local, county, state departments about a certain situation. So they would come upon something, a factual piece, and they would send it to me if I was in Newark or I was in New Jersey or wherever we were, and then we would forward it to behavioral science. And it was pretty amazing conclusions that behavioral science would make based on a very simple patrolman, and I'm saying it's simple, but based on a simple set of facts that a patrolman might come across. And next thing you know, you're really down a rabbit hole, but it's a very productive rabbit hole. What comes back is definitely an ask from the Bureau, where you would really expect it to be, hey, here's a conclusion. We looked at that and we got to this point, and here to help you out. More asks would come back. Now you're in the middle of a situation where you're trying to protect that local officer, but at the same time, you need to get the information, right? So that's when I always, hey, what's going on? What's going on that we're getting on this simple little task, we're getting more asks.
The thing that's really interesting about it all is that in order for an operation to be stood up, it has to be funded. It's not like the TV shows where, like, Jim takes an interest in something so then he can run, and I take an interest in something and we're like given like a thumbs up to run with it. It doesn't work that way. You have to have funding approved, doesn't matter your level of interest, before you go. So if you're talking about FBI, you're talking about CIA, you're talking about groups that have a vested interest in national security. That is the mission. So when funding is reviewed, the question that the funding source is asking itself is this operation going to contribute positively to national security? Think about how many times funding is denied. I promise you right now, you have no idea how often funding is denied. We know it well because you sit around all day long reading about denied funding operations. So when funding is actually approved, that means that there's such a preponderance of evidence that it's a national security concern that the funding is approved. So when you hear like when a patrolman's correspondence, a report of something that he saw in Arkansas, New Mexico, whatever, when that actually makes it to FBI and then money is awarded for FBI to look into it, that's significant, right? That's not just some small thing.
Absolutely, man. That's a great point. And you're right, because we actually have to sit in front of boards every quarter, even if we have a funded operation. We have to come back and justify, first off, with results, right? Because everybody has great intentions. You got to have results. Once you get those results and you're moving it forward, you have to prove your case, your need, over and over and over again. And what I would see is a simple observation that there's never a need to continue to provide factual information or results in order to continue that particular plan. Who's doing that? It's not me. I was never involved in doing those things, even though I was at a level where I could have been. There's others that are doing those things.
This is what that whole Grush thing is about, right? He was in charge of finding missing money. There was like millions of dollars that were missing, apparently, that went to black programs, right? What did you guys think of that whole thing?
Black programs are a real thing. I mean, there's a whole black budget. It's a real thing. And it's an important thing because if you know what the budget is that's being spent, you can start to ascertain or start to deduce what it might be being spent on. So a black budget's an important thing, even to protect from accountants at CIA understanding what CIA is doing. They don't have a need to know. So why should they know whether we're spending 1 trillion or 12 trillion, right? Whatever it might be. So black budgets are an important thing. When it comes to people who are whistleblowing in general, I find that it basically breaks into two camps. You've got genuine whistleblowers who know something is going on that shouldn't be, and they've tried to go through the proper channels, and the proper channels either haven't worked or they're working too slow, so they come out publicly and blow the whistle. Then you have other people who are just not right, just not mentally right in the head, and they've been in something so long, or they're in something so deep they've lost the larger perspective, they've lost the mission, essentially, and then they come out and they whistleblow. From what I've heard, Grush is more of the true type of whistleblower. He saw stuff and then had people on the inside that just weren't working fast enough, or he wasn't being taken seriously, so he came out and spoke. But there are plenty of other examples of whistleblowers who do the opposite.
Danny, what did Sarfati say about Grush again? What was his take on that?
He's a fucking idiot.
No, I get a little skeptical, and I think a lot of people out there do, when you see things pile on almost in unison in a way from so many governments. I mean, we just saw like that video in Mexico.
Yeah.
I don't know if we can put that in the corner of the screen, Steven, or if that's copyrighted.
The aliens they just found in Mexico. No, that, like I said, that shit's been on the internet for a long time.
But now they're like putting this whole dog and pony show on to make sure fucking everybody sees it. And I'll say, like, when you listen to Grush talk at Congress, like, not that this really counts for anything, but he comes across as pretty credible. But there's also so many arguments about what these things are. Are they crafts from another planet?
Right.
Are they future humans? You get the religious sect that wonders if they're like demons. So they're, some of it sounds crazy, but if we don't know what it is, we don't know what it is. And when you hear him going
Pull up
through
one
it,
of them in the boxes.
when he says stuff about I may get this wording a little wrong, but he's like, we have possession of biological
He called
entities,
them biologicals.
Biologicals not of this planet or something like that. Is it this? Is that what he's referring to? Is it the little green man that James Fox is talking about in so many of his sightings? Or, is it something else? I don't know.
Yeah, and it's important because biologics, what else is biological? Plants, right? Soil samples. There's all sorts of things. Germs, viruses. And taking things out of context, especially when it comes to the way government people speak versus the way that the lay civilian speaks, we speak in completely different terms. Government people work really hard to use terminology that they can't be like held accountable to in the future.
Right.
So it's overgeneralized and undercommitted.
Yes.
Meanwhile, civilians Civilians are coming out and they want to be like hyper specific about everything. So that's why you hear terms like we have biological proof or evidence that is not of this planet or not of this known planet.
Stephen, can you pull up the photo of David Grush during his testimony in front of Congress? But if you were to play hypothetical roulette and say, are these things really aliens or is it DARPA? What would your bet be?
DARPA.
Wild guess.
Yeah. Oh, wow, that was fast.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt in my mind either.
It's not a wild guess. I mean, I've
just-
I've actually spent over a year now traveling and researching this stuff. It was a guess a year ago. Now I've actually seen data, and I'm like, the 2% that I can't explain, it still fits terrestrial models.
And you've also been public now, at least like on podcasts and stuff, talking with Danny a couple years back, 2 or 3 years back, that like you do think we are not alone in the universe,
Absolutely.
right? So it's not like you're just like, oh, fuck all this stuff, we're the only things here. You just don't think the evidence we're seeing for
Right there.
maybe some of the specific stuff they're dropping is compelling enough. And the things that you've seen up close, it seems to be, I mean, you and I were talking off air, but it seems like you're thinking Chinese spy balloons and DARPA.
Yeah, I mean, it's, and this is just, I would love to hear Jim's take on this, but the way I see it is you have to start by ruling out what's known. If you can't rule out what's known, you can't leap that the solution is the unknown.
Right.
It's not a judicious way of analyzing a problem.
Yeah, slippery slope right there. I mean, I think that makes a ton of sense. And what I like about this guy, this is a true American patriot whistleblower, right? So he is coming out to make some statements that definitely are he's got some clear danger that he takes on, some clear risk doing this, right? So my thought on it is, and I think we talked about this on the last pod, it's the whole conspiracy theory generation. What's not known, the gap needs to be filled.
Yes.
Right? So, but this guy knows. He's been there. He's been in the middle of it, right? He's not your traditional whistleblower. I mean, the Bureau has had issues across the board, and we've seen it every day with whistleblowers and what's going on. Sexual harassment in the Bureau, never been addressed. And it never will be addressed.
Look at the rows.
it's-
Look at the rows behind him.
Yeah.
Is that James Clapper?
Look at Sean Ryan there.
So
Popping
you
in.
got Sean Ryan there.
Mel Gibson on the right.
I think
Why
that's
is
Clapper.
James Clapper right behind him?
And then
got a good
George
history.
Knapp, right? And then this is
Jeremy Corbell.
Oh, yes.
He's like the director of UFO docs.
Yeah.
so it's really interesting to me because you have like this mixed bag
Yes.
of credibility behind him. But the other thing is he had to take the steps himself to come out and say something.
Yes, absolutely. And that's a huge piece for a guy, especially a guy who's
Made a
your
career in
traditional-
military?
Exactly. Your traditional Army or Air Force officer, military guy. Yes, sir. Moving forward, salute, move on. This guy, this is impressive to me.
If you like this short clip, make sure you click here to see the next clip or here to see the full podcast episode.
So fresh, so new.